Well, if this is an episode about failures, none of you are going to get a word in, right?
All right, you go first. Biggest speaking fail, or at least the most memorable one.
Oh, speaking failures, I was thinking of live failures. I might have slightly less content than I thought then.
We know you have it in you, Francisco.
Yes. Right. So I'm, there's I think a more important one, but let me just give you something that actually caught me by surprise, right? So I was doing this speech, like a small audience a few years ago, and I opened the way I used to open a lot of my speeches back then, which was with a joke or something I thought was funny, right? So I started talking about something like how, money is not important and you don't need money to achieve happiness. And I learned that after a week with my wife in a resort in the Maldives. And I thought, okay, this is pretty decent humor. And I got almost nothing. Right? Like one guy was like, the Maldives. And everybody else looked very confused. And then later I was talking to a friend of mine and he's like, they don't know that it's meant to be funny. I was like, how do they not know it's meant to be funny? And they said, the moment you get on stage, they're just getting to know you. Maybe they have seen something from you before, but most likely they have no idea who you are. So if you go and say something, they don't know yet if that's supposed to be funny, if it's supposed to be sad, if it's supposed to be serious. So you can't go and expect a reaction straight away from an audience that doesn't know you, because that often is just not going to work, right? So you can't just jump 2 feet in straight into the funny stuff or the dramatic stuff. It's just not going to land. You're going to catch them by surprise, and that's going to confuse them. So yes, I stopped trying to be funny straight away.
So your biggest speaking failure is you tried a joke once that didn't quite work?
Do you know me?
Do you know how
dramatic
I feel like me
this
and
is
Joe are going to
me?
win this episode. I feel like we have bigger fails than that. No.
I got more. But do you know how dramatic for me this is, trying to be funny and not being able to
and not be funny?
The real question I think I have is okay, so it didn't work, which is not ideal. The first words out of your mouth, they don't know where you're coming from. It's confusing. Like, what was the result of that? Was the audience impacted by it, or were you more impacted by it, which impacted them? Like, what happened?
I think both. I mean, one, they were clearly catching up, right? So they didn't know if I had just tried to say something funny that didn't work, or if I had some really weird thought processes that involved the Maldives and existential questions about money. And I was taken aback, right? I was like, hold on, what? They didn't laugh? What is going on here? What is wrong with these people? What is wrong with me? Right? So, which is another, I think, danger of trying something like humor, which is if you're basing a lot of your speaking on that and all of a sudden it starts not working, then what? Should you just revisit the whole thing? Should you start dropping content because you're not afraid, not convinced it's going to work? So it was less than ideal. But no, it's not my biggest speaking failure. It's just the first thing that came to my mind when you talked about speaking failures.
Yeah. Well, it is important though, right? Because Joe and I just recorded an episode about getting the premise right. Essentially, the first words out of your mouth, making sure that you indicate to the audience as quickly as possible, this is going to be worth your time, right? Answering the question the audience has, is this relevant to me? Will this be worth my time? And so that first sentence, like you often hear the open with a joke advice given. And I think most people understand this as bad advice, but I don't think people understand why it's bad advice. It's not because being funny is bad. Being funny is great. If you can get a laugh within seconds of taking the stage, like absolutely do that. There's something, Joe, you can probably talk about the impact of humor.
It relaxes everybody. It creates closeness. It's a wonderful thing. And, as we kind of begin to dissect this, I go back to when I just heard Francisco tell the story now, and I was working really hard to figure out why it was supposed to be funny. It took me a while to get there.
I had the same reaction. I had no idea why it was supposed to be funny, so I was just waiting.
Yes, Maldives, expensive, far away. There you go.
And I don't even know what that is. I have no idea what that is because I'm an American. I don't know anything.
So I was thinking, island, no money, interesting.
It was a difficult one. It would get to you at some point. All right, maybe it wasn't the best humor I could have opened with, okay? Right?
Okay, so here's something interesting. So let me ask you a question. Is this something you had tried before or that you knew worked in different audiences, or was this a new attempt?
I don't try material before often. I trust that I know what I'm doing.
We have so many lessons embedded in this, incredibly small. Right. So, I mean, there's an incredibly important argument to be made here that you really shouldn't be testing material early in a speech. This was actually something I learned really hard as a magician. Now, if you're a brand new speaker, everything's new. You just do what you have to do. But I learned as a magician, most magicians I knew, in fact, most comedians I knew as well, would always try the new material like about halfway into the set. They would always try it after a guaranteed bit, a bit that they absolutely knew they'd done hundreds of times. There was no way this wasn't going to work, so that if it didn't work, it was softened by the fact that they had just seen something that was great, and you could go into something that you knew was great, and it wasn't the first thing that they heard or the last thing that they heard either, so they don't have the the bookends problem. So I think that, but having said that, there are times when you want to try something, and what you want to try is the opening line. You want to try a new opening line, and there's just no other way. And I think this has always been a problem for speakers. We don't have open mics. We don't have the kind of Tuesday night, low stakes, no stakes environments. I guess the closest thing,
like comedians
do, like magicians do, like musicians do,
or magicians,
even like singer-songwriters and all that. Bands get to do there's all kinds of clubs for bands now that they get to play amongst themselves. I guess the closest thing to that is, well, it's probably Toastmasters, but you're not actually testing it out in front of a real audience. You're only testing it out in front of other speakers.
I thought you were going to say you're not testing it out in front of a real audience. You're testing it out in front of Toastmasters.
Leaving that aside.
Who will accept a lot.
Cut.
I know. I love you. I love you. It's part of my life. But you know.
But it is not an audience of your ideal listener, or your ideal. It's not your ideal audience. It's other speakers, for the most part, or aspiring speakers. I guess maybe the other closest thing to that would be the local networking groups, the chambers of commerce. Like, they have business owners or local business owner, if you're speaking to business people, which we tend to, but you may not be. But yeah, it's hard to figure out how to test out new material and see if it works.
Well, one way to test out new material is to do it. It depends on the material, right? Because I trade in a lot of stories. It's not the hardest thing in the world to test a story, because you can do it through a newsletter, you can do it on social media, more like the format you would normally use. You can try in any other work you do that is not standing on stage in front of hundreds of people. You can test stories, you can just test with your friends, right? You can just tell it to a family member, a friend, whatever, in like a non-social environment, not, let me try something that I might put in my keynote, right? You just tell the story and see if it actually plays with people normally. But I think stories are perhaps easier than other things, because the story, after a while you get a feel for what stories are likely to land, unless you're putting most of your keynote hanging onto this one story. You shouldn't completely misunderstand what's going to be the reception of a story, for example. But for other parts, that would be different.
So what did you do next, Francisco?
I just carried on, and I just carried on with the material as I had it, because I knew it was good and I had nothing else I could possibly do. It was not a particularly, I didn't have a massively long slot or anything. I had material that I had mostly memorized at the time, because I still did that. It was just like, well, that didn't laugh that one, hope they laugh at the next one, right? And I just had to do what I had to do with a gnawing feeling that I wasn't good enough. So basically, just like every day.
All right, so I want to go to Joe to hear yours. Before we do that, though, I want to quickly, this is not mine, but because of what you just said, Francisco, I want to relay a very recent time when something that very similar happened to me. And it happened to me with something I had done hundreds and hundreds of times, if not thousands. So I was at a college campus, which and it was like a 2-year, a very small kind of 2-year community college style school intermediary here in the States, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of America, in the middle of nowhere. And they had booked me to do my How to Magically Connect with Anyone speech during lunch in the corner of the cafe. So no one knew there was supposed to be a speaker. These are just students in between classes getting lunch. And they thought if we do it there'll be an audience. We'll never be able to get people to a dedicated room. The problem is, this is like surprise speaking engagement. It's like, it's not like being a musician or even a magician. A magician, you do some magic and people go, the hell is that? And they come over and watch. You're just like a guy with a microphone talking loudly while they're trying to get lunch and study for their next class. Like, there could not have been worse conditions. That's not true. I have a story.
Well, do you know that that's Speaker's Corner, right?
Right?
This is
a Speaker's Corner.
In the UK, in London, there's this place in next to Hyde Park or something, where there is like a corner, and then I think there's a little pedestal or something, and then crazies come up there, stand up on the thing and start talking, right? And then sometimes they draw a crowd, sometimes they don't, right? But this is not the best way to get a message across.
No, it's not an ideal circumstance. It is actually not the worst situation I've ever been in. That story's coming later. But so I walk up on stage, and you've all seen me. This is one of the reasons we have to tell our own clients that I am not someone you should be copying, because I come from magic and I have a bit of an entertainment thing. So the first thing I do is I throw my hands out in front of me, and I go, everybody go like this, and everybody puts their arms out and they start wiggling their fingers. And I do a bit that's actually called the Russian arm twist. It's very old in magic, and it gets people to tie up their arms and everybody laughs, whatever. So the point is, I throw my arms out, take the stage. I never say anything. I just go, okay, everybody out like this. And everybody does it. I have done this. I did it when I was a magician. I've done it as a speaker. I have done this for probably 20 years. I've done it thousands and thousands of times. Never anywhere has this been a problem. I throw my arms out and I go, everybody out like this. Now, there are people looking at me. There's 7 or 8 people that are actually sitting towards the front. They knew this was happening. There's a couple of students who are watching me, and they all just stare at me like this. They're just looking at me. Now, some of these people are 8 feet from me. Like, I could practically reach out to them from the stage. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Out like this, out like this, out like this. I'm making eye contact with people who are practically sitting at the table with me, and they're just staring at me. And so I go and look at a different part, and I make eye contact with a different student. I'm like, out like this, out like this. And they stare at me. And I can't do the bit, and I've now committed 2 minutes of asking the audience to put their arms out. And I finally just put my hands down, and I went, well, all right. So, and then I did the first line of the talk, and that was it. In my brain, I'm like, you have 58 more minutes on your contract. You know what I mean? I literally not a single person, not the person who booked me, not the students on the student activities board, none of them, not the kids I'd been talking to for the last hour during sound check, no one would put their hands out. All English speak. This is like Indiana or something. Like, this is Americana, man. Like, it was all English speaking.
Did you ever get to find out
No idea.
why? Like,
talk went great.
No, they didn't say anything.
Talk went great.
Okay.
Because nobody likes to be told to get their arms out or to do any physical things. Like, I must admit, I don't think I've ever told you this, right? But this is a testament to how good you are as a speaker, I guess. Because every time I see you do that, I'm like, oh, dude, don't. Like, I would hate to do that. If I was sitting in the audience, I was like, no, don't ask me to move my arms in a funny way. I would hate it.
Everyone does it,
and I know,
every time.
I know, I guess some people get like, just if they hate it, they just feel, oh, everybody's doing it, I might as well, right? But as soon as any speaker tries something like that, like show of hands, I was like, oh, you gotta get a show of fingers.
Yeah, see, I agree with you. Show of hands, I wouldn't do, and I don't like. What this is part of it is just the whirlwind of being introduced. So I'm introduced, Brian Miller, and everyone's clapping, so their arms are already out. Their arms are already doing something. And I hit the center stage and I go, everybody out like this, out like this, out like this. It's a little warm-up that magicians do. I say it's a warm-up that magicians do. And everyone's like, okay, like they go from here to here. It's not a big move. And everyone's already there. And once we do that, I immediately make a joke because I'm wiggling my fingers as I'm doing it. And you've seen me do it, but the audience here listening maybe hasn't. So I go like this, and then as soon as everyone's got their arms out wiggling their fingers, I go, oh, I'm sorry, you don't have to wiggle your fingers, but I appreciate that everyone's doing it. And everyone laughs every time. And they go to put their arms down and go, no, bring your hands back out. And everyone puts their hands back out. And a lot of this is, as a magician, this is a very, very good way to train people to follow your lead, which you need as a magician, right? You need that. But also, it's a funny bit, and it gets people engaged, and it gets them. It also tells them I'm going to be interactive because I'm going to be interactive.
Yeah, and you try to come up with sophisticated existential life question jokes about expensive resorts, and you get nothing, and then you tell people to wiggle their fingers and they laugh.
Everybody laughs.
This is why we can't have nice things.
The world we live in.
This is why we can't have nice things.
So, in any regard, in this situation, for the first time, literally, and since in my career, nothing happened. It did not work. And I thought about it so much, because I told that story to so many of my speaker friends and colleagues afterwards, and they were just like, what did you do? And I was like, thank goodness I'm a confident veteran speaker at this point, because if I had been a younger, less confident speaker, I would have melted down. I would totally spiraled inside my head. But it was like, all right, and then we did the talk, and that's all it was. So listen, even if you've done something that has worked a million times, there is no guarantee it will work this time. Every audience, every room is different. So there's another lesson.
Be prepared for anything.
Joe, what's your story?
Right. So I offended my client.
Good.
From the
I'm
stage.
glad I'm not having to tell that story. I'm surprised I don't have that story.
Well, here goes. So my brief was to convince the room that executive presence is a skill they should care about and they should want to put their time into. Right. This is a room full of IT tech folks in the banking sector, and they were very, very kind of high performing technical background folks. Right. So their technical skills were great. People skills, not so much. According to the person who hired me, who was their learning and development manager. So I said, great, okay, we can do that. We can convince them that this is something they should be interested in. No problem. So I go up there, I start, I connect, everything is going great. I go into making my argument, and I'd found this stat from a study that Stanford, Harvard, and Carnegie Foundation, I believe, had all come up with, and that said that success at work came down to people skills 85% of the time, and technical skills allowed for about 15% of on-the-job success. And the room somehow kind of gets a little bit fussy when I talk about that, and they were very polite by the end of the talk, but it wasn't the same. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I suppose they're just not that interested. So I go home. I have a nice goodbye with everybody. I go home. Then I do the briefing call with the debriefing call with the person who hired me, and she said, it wasn't really nice to hear that all the work these people are doing only gets them 15% of the way. I could not have been more embarrassed. I think it took everything I had to kind of keep my face from staying together. And the knot in my stomach was there for days, because I should have known this, right? It's the thing that I talk about all the time, like, take care of the people in the room. Don't bruise their egos. At least don't do it until you've got a really solid relationship with them, which I did not at the time. They didn't know me. It was the first time they were seeing me. So that stayed with me. That's a while back. It's, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. And that's the thing. It's not because I hadn't done my research, I hadn't done I just hadn't done it well enough.
See, that's interesting to me, because that stat in a talk that you were giving makes sense to establish the stakes.
For sure. This is why you should care about this skill.
Yeah.
Right? Because it takes you 85% of the way, right? To whatever success means to you at work. But it also told them what you're doing amounts to very, very little. What I'm doing amounts to.
Yeah, I heard that, and I perhaps because we probably think we don't lack people's skills, although I am aware of that line as soon as I say it. But I can imagine a spin to that would have made that arguably a positive thing, where it's like basically if you're relying on not so much that it only gets you 15% of the way, because that's not how I sort of framed it in my head. My head was like, well, if you're being successful at work and you're lacking people's skills, then your technical skills are having to do a lot more of the heavy lifting, right? You need to be way more proficient technically, but you'd have to probably lead with that. But yeah, I guess it's I can understand how some people would be upset, although maybe not to the point that a room would quiet.
Yeah, I'm shocked by the level of disappointment or the level of disengagement or frustration that would have come out of that. But also, I'm wondering if it was framed outward versus inward. In other words, if it was framed as when I discovered this, it made me feel terrible. I thought, oh, all that hard work I'm doing on X, Y, and Z is only doing 15% of the work. But what I realized was all that hard work I'm doing, if I want it to be recognized to its full potential, I also need to do these other things. And that's what I'm here to talk about. So I wonder if it was the lack of framing around it.
I didn't do that well enough. I wanted it to hurt, and it did way too much.
Well done. Yeah, he did the...
So I got that part right a little bit too well. And when I said, I hadn't done my prep well enough, I did not consider the cultural aspect. This was a culture where egos are really important. And it's not like, people could have taken it very matter-of-factly and said, oh, really? I'm only getting 15% of my potential out there. Okay, so I need to do the work for the rest, for the remaining 85%. No, it was not that kind of place. It was a place where people really needed to be recognized and treated with a little bit of, velvet gloves.
Yeah. I had not quite to that extent, but I had a similar thing happen. For many years, I was doing a lot. Well, I guess I still do. I was doing a lot of speaking in the healthcare industry. I actually do more public health now, which is not the same thing as a client made sure I understood before speaking at their event many times at one point. They were like, just again, this is public health, is not healthcare. And I was like, you must have had an issue with this with speakers in the past. It's like the 7th time you've said that in the last 2 hours, And they were like, yeah, it's just really important. I said, right. Public health, I understand. So like not doctors, nurses, whatever. They're like, no, there will be doctors and nurses in the audience, but they work in public health, not in healthcare. I was like, well, can you appreciate how a speaker from the outside never mind. Anyway, so I used to speak a lot in healthcare, and I have a piece of my talk on human connection that is about multitasking and the myth of multitasking. And it's great because it ties magic. I get to tie a magic trick, do a magic trick, show them how their inability to multitask led them to be fooled by something incredibly stupid, and then turn that into, now imagine how our trying to multitask affects our ability to connect with people. So it bridges this gap beautifully for me. But when I do multitasking, I do a flash of stats, like really quick. It's the only hard science that I have in my whole talk. It's like 4 or 5 slides in a row of stats around multitasking to really drive home, this is not just a silly magic trick example. This is a real deal. And I used to have 2 stats in there back to back. One was about texting while driving. And one, because I was doing healthcare, was about the amount of basically injuries, deaths, negative outcomes in the healthcare system as a result of clerical errors, which are essentially goofing up paperwork that ultimately results in very, very catastrophic consequences. It felt like that was a way to really ground why this matters, and it did, and it was too much. It was a step too far for people who spend all day, every day trying to save people's lives. And I could see it. I could see everybody just shrink down when that showed up. It was like it did the job, but I couldn't recover from it. And then I ultimately removed the texting and while driving one because it was like thinking about like teens with fatalities and stuff. It was just too much for people in the middle of an otherwise uplifting, light magic talk about human connection.
Yeah, that's the thing. Once something like this happens, the energy never gets back to where it was. Polite as people
It's
may
interesting
be.
that because we always talk about how people need to connect to the emotional stakes of the subject, right? Why does it matter? And it needs to really matter. It can't just be, oh, that's annoying. Oh, I wish that didn't happen. Like, it needs to connect to an emotion. But as these examples seem to show, some emotions are just not okay. I guess one, hopelessness is not one that is okay.
Right.
And guilt, which perhaps is the one there, is like you don't want to feel like you have, I'm not sure if it's guilt is the one, but like when you say that, it's basically saying, let me show you how you are screwing this up or potentially going to screw this up if you try to do this thing that I'm telling you doesn't work. And, clearly, you're not accusing them of it, but this is the lighthearted or the light version of basically saying people in your industry are screwing this up. And here's the proof. And then I guess people either feel guilty or they feel defensive. That would be my guess.
Yeah, guilt, shame, defensive. Yeah. None of these things are conducive to moving forward, to a productive conversation. They shut people down, right? They're essentially. It's like the difference between like an open question and a closed question. Like it just shuts them right down.
At least in public, I would think.
I wonder if it's the emotion itself or how much of it. Or
that's interesting.
Or maybe if it was there, but then immediately supported by something that offers a solution or a resource, right? So this is happening, and here's what you can do about it, like right away.
Yeah.
Context, because shame can be a powerful motivator individually. Right? Something, this is a common, you always see people giving this example when they're talking about, exercising, right? People don't really care. Like, this is a common, like, dad example. It's like, one day I went to the pool with my kids and I saw all these dads and everybody looked in good shape. I didn't want to take my shirt off and they, like, feel embarrassed or something. And that's the motivation for looking after themselves. So it can be a motivator individually, but I don't know if you're in a group, in a public context and somebody basically shames you for something that perhaps you hadn't realized might have been something you were doing or would potentially do, if that doesn't, throw a spanner in the works.
No, it's interesting. It's definitely worth thinking about. These are all great examples.
Yeah.
You had the public healthcare one. I almost screwed something like that. I think much worse than that. Few weeks ago, I was in Brazil on my kind of holiday with my family, and I got hired by some friends of mine to go and do a long workshop in their company, and the name of their company in Portuguese is when they told me, I heard Contato Seguros, right? So and that would translate as like insurance contact. Right? So I had come up with a whole bunch of like insurance related stories and examples. And I think the day before the talk, I just wanted to just look up some information. I think I was actually looking for an address to make sure I had the right address. And I realized that the name of the company wasn't Contato Seguros. It was called Contato Seguro, without an S at the end. And without an S at the end, it doesn't mean insurance contacts. It means safe contacts. And I'm like, hold on. What's going on here? And it wasn't an insurance company at all, right? It was a company that came up with like an external complaint channel, which is not something that's very common in Brazil. And I'm like, no, none of my stories work now. I have to rethink this whole thing. Yes, I had to rethink most of it. Luckily, I
That must have been a late night.
Luckily, I have the stories in my head, so I can find them if I don't have to start from scratch, really. But one letter was the difference.
And that is why I don't customize my talks. Everyone gets the same talk.
The biggest speaking failure I have had, and this happened a few times, especially in the beginning, and might occasionally happen from time to time, is the one that looks the least like a speaking failure, which is you go on stage and surprisingly for me, I don't actually say stuff that I shouldn't on stage. On a keynote, I don't, because I'm much more disciplined than that. Like I don't have stories that I perhaps shouldn't be telling in front of live audiences. I'm surprisingly good at not putting my foot in my mouth when I'm on stage. So I don't actually have any sort of catastrophic failures or anything like that. And I usually get very good reviews on my talks, as both of you do as well. But the failure comes after, really, because especially in the beginning of my career speaking, nothing would happen, right? Because I've given a great talk in my head. People loved it. They congratulated me on it. I got great reviews on it, but then you don't get anything from it, right? You don't get rebooked. You don't get workshops or consulting on the back of it. And because the catastrophic mistake I made was to either not ask enough questions in the beginning or not ask the right questions. So something sometimes as simple afterwards as what exactly looks like success for you wasn't asked, or was asked kind of, without enough depth. And then I don't hit that mark, and then there's nothing to come from it. Or I actually ask the question and I don't set their expectations right. So because I'm talking about storytelling, they might hear the talk, love it, and then people don't start immediately telling stories at work, and they go, well, that didn't work.
Yeah, nothing as a result. Yeah, it's an easy way. So here's my biggest, or at least most painful speaking failure. I had at least half, if not 2/3 of an audience stand up and walk out in the middle of a speech. And I'm not talking about 2/3 of an audience of 10 people. I'm talking about 2/3 of an audience of 100. It was a mob that stood up and walked out. So here's what happened. I had been booked to do 2 events for the same college. It was all my biggest speaking failures happened at universities. Students are incredibly unpredictable. And it was for orientation weekend. And I've done a lot of these. And I came to do the freshman orientation, which was in a field house with literally thousands of students. It was massive. I went up, did my talk, and it just crushed. I have it on film. I mean, it was hugely successful. And what was really cool is in the middle of that talk, I decided to take a risk. I decided to try to have the students turn to someone next to them and do an actual workshop style exercise while I was on stage in front of thousands of students in a field house. Now that invites a lot of unpredictability, but it worked amazingly. The students did it. I got to bring their attention back in. I got to have 1 or 2 students with runners with microphones talk about what they learned. It was really cool at freshman orientation, right? 2 days later, I left, went to a different state the very next day, did a gig at a different place, and then came back the next day, back to the same school. They wanted me to do the sophomores as well, which was unusual. But this was in the early days of the pandemic where there had been a year or 2 where there had been very not normal school. And they thought, well, these sophomores are kind of like freshmen. They haven't really had the campus experience yet. The thing is, the sophomores were not required to be there. The freshmen were. So what happened is they did it in the same room in the field house, set up the same way it had been set up 2 days earlier, except the sophomores weren't required to be there. And so about 100 students, 80 to 100 students showed up in a room set up for thousands. They still had me on the stage that was 25 feet in the air with a microphone that was like the voice of God. And the students who were there had clearly been told to be there by their RAs. Their RAs are just grabbing students and saying, come with me, you must come, otherwise no one will show up. Now I'm up on stage giving this talk. These kids don't know why they're there. They're already sophomores. They just want to be with their friends and get into the school year, go eat something stupid, right? And I'm trying to talk about human connection, and I'm trying to do a magic trick from a million miles away without, it's very awkward. And then I did the dumbest thing I've done in my entire speaking career, maybe in my entire career on stage. I tried to do that same interactive exercise that I had done 2 days earlier that had worked so well. Except I didn't have a room full of people who, one, had to be there, and two, were fully engaged. I had a room full of very few people who did not have to be there. So I said, turn to someone next to you or turn to the person behind you, like get up and find a new person and do this exercise. And about 2/3 of the room stood up, and instead of finding a person, literally just walked out the back door. Just left. And
they found a person just somewhere else.
As a mob was leaving my speech, mid-speech, the president of the university was walking in from the back. So I finished the talk for the kids who were left. At the end of the presentation, of course, the president was there. I shook his hand. I said, thanks so much for having me. It was like the 7th time I had done that school, and I have never been back. So I had to drive 4 hours that night after that gig. I did the gig. I have 4 hours to drive in the dark. And for the first time, I think, in my life, I didn't have a podcast or music on. I just drove in silence in the dark for 4 hours. And mind you, this was like 3 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? I was not, this was recent memory. It still haunts me. Like, I still think about it. Like, no amount of successes, talkadots, percentages, feedback will ever convince me that that wasn't like a tremendously embarrassing screw up.
I like how the way you described it. What really struck me is that, like, you described yourself through the eyes of the speakers as this guy talking about human connection and doing magic tricks. And I'm like, is this what haunts him in the dark? That is just some guy talking about human connection and doing magic tricks on a stage?
I mean,
magic tricks or human connection that didn't land.
So close to the bone.
I think that's like the I'm really just a magician in clown shoes. Why is anybody letting me do this? Still coming out. Whenever something goes wrong like that, I think I really revert back to that, like 2015. I accidentally gave a viral TED talk, and now I'm being asked to do something I'm not qualified to do. I think that still drives me somehow.
Yes,
but that's okay. I'll talk to my therapist.
Yeah.
So what I love about this is that people can hear that. Yes, sometimes it doesn't go to plan. What do? Just carry on.
Keep on. Just keep swimming.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we've got all kinds of great. These are great. This is really, really fun to hear. I don't know if this is going to be a part 2 because I feel like we covered the big ones today. This may not be a series, and hopefully it's not a series. Hopefully we don't come back in a month like, boy, have I got a new one for you. Let's hope this was the one and only. But I do want to hear from folks listening, watching. Have you had a big speaking fail? Or at least an embarrassing moment or something that you learned? Drop it in the comments if you're on YouTube, or shoot us a DM, or if you're on Spotify, I think you can leave comments these days. Hit us up on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you as well. So thanks so much for listening, and see you on the Speaker Path.